Isn't it weird that we feel some type of way about drinking coffee now? I'm 40. I've been drinking coffee for 21 years. But all because some guy made it like his thing. You know, we gotta feel weird about it. I'm not gonna feel weird about it. I'm gonna drink my coffee. And I'm gonna tell you guys why I think you should buy a 50mm 1.2 G Master. And here's the thing, I'm not talking to some people. Well, I am talking to some people. If you're not currently in the market for a 50mm, this is not the video for you. Go watch my video on the A7 IV because I'm going to be making a long-term review on it, and I think you guys might like that one, but you want to watch the first one. But anyway, back to the 50mm. If you're not in the market for a 50mm, don't watch this video. But if you are in the market for a 50mm and you have a Sony camera, I think that you need to go out and buy the 50mm 1.2 G Master. And we're going to get into several reasons why. This is going to be a longer video. In some of my other videos, I try to keep it, you know, short and to the point, but I do really want to dive into what I love about this lens and why it is I think that everybody should go out and buy it. All right, so the first thing that I want to get into is the make and build of this lens. It's a G Master, and if you guys have ever used a G Master, there's not a whole lot to be surprised by. But the one thing that I was surprised by is the second focus hole button. And so what that does is, you know how like when you're shooting in vertical and you're holding the camera like this, it gives you a button in the right place for where your thumb would naturally fall, instead of trying to maneuver it in another way. So the second focus hole button is quite welcome. And then another thing that I really like about the G Master lenses is that they do have the Aperture Ring. Now, a lot of people don't like the Aperture Ring, and I understand why. But here's why I specifically love the Aperture Ring. I am currently recording on my A7C, and if you guys have used the A7C or if you heard me talk about the A7C, it is missing a dial. And the dial that it's missing is the front sort of dial right here, this little dial, and usually people have this little dial set to be their aperture control ring, and with the A7C missing one, lenses with a built-in aperture ring become really important to me. Now, I can't speak for, you know, everyone else, but they become really important to me. That dog is killing me. That dog's killing me right now. Anyway, so I do love the aperture ring. And then, you know, it's just built like a G Master. And then the second thing I love about this build, the lens only weighs 27.5 ounces. For us Americans out there who can't do the math, that's less than 2 pounds. And here is the 85mm G Master, and you can see that they are, hold on, let me take this lens hood off of here. You can see that Sony did a really good job of keeping this 50mm small compared to, you know, this 85, and also compared to its competition, the Nikon, which is just a behemoth of a lens, and then also the Canon lens. I think the Canon lens and the Sony lens are pretty close in size, but I think Sony is the lighter lens. So that's the build of it. It's just a G Master. You get the extra kind of focus hole button. You get the extra iris ring, and so I think those things are really important. And I think that kind of gives the lens a very premium feel when it comes to the build of it, especially for a lens that you're gonna spend $2,000 for. And we'll get into the price of this lens a little bit later. And then let's talk about some kind of specs and technology of the lens. It's using the new like linear XD motors that Sony has come up with. And what that means is just like, so on this 85mm lens, they were using like these circular motors, so that when you know hit the focus button, it would kind of drive the elements in a circular motion to find the focus. And so the new way that it works is just they're on these rails. The elements are on these rails, and as you are finding focus, it's just driving on these rails. And what that allows it to do is two things. It allows it to be lightning fast, and then it also allows it to be really quiet. This lens, when it focuses, is awfully loud. Let me pop this on a camera real quick so I can demonstrate it for you guys. Hopefully it'll work. Hopefully we'll be able to pick it up. All right, so this is the 85mm lens, and so if we you know, change focus, can you guys hear that? You can actually hear it kind of focusing. Maybe you guys can hear it. But it's loud. It's loud when it focuses. All right, so Editor Jamil here, and I am realizing that I did not do a good job of demonstrating just how loud the 85 is. And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and try to show you guys how loud this lens actually is. All right, so it's going to be very fast. Here we go. So there's that. I'm gonna get back to this one. It's getting windy out here. It's getting windy. Gotta take a little coffee break. Where was I? XD motors. Right. So these linear motors allows for the focusing to be lightning quick, but it also allows for it to be super silent. And I can't overstate just how silent this lens is, both in photo, but more importantly in video, because as the world starts to move, you know, further and further into vertical video, and people try to, increase their production value, this lens becomes very important, especially for me. I am finding that my niche on Instagram is providing like 30-minute, 1-minute kind of workout videos for people, little workout reels, and this 50mm has been great in doing that, and recording video, you know, with the lens close to the mic, and just keeping that sound down has been really important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is how this lens works with Sony cameras. And this becomes really important, right? Because we wanted to get back, I told you guys that we would talk about the price of this lens, all right? We're gonna talk about the price of this lens now in conjunction with some of the technology in it. This is, if I'm right, I think I'm right. I hope it's not too loud. Can you guys hear me over the wind? If I'm right, this is the first lens that was built specifically for the new focusing system on the A1. Now, why is that important? All right, it's important because Sony came out and touted that the A1 would allow you to get 30 frames per second, right? 30 frames per second. But there's an asterisk, there's a little star, right? It's only when combined with G Master lenses that you get up to that 30 frames per second. And then what they did was they designed this lens specifically first, and I think now the 70 to 200 version 2 to work in conjunction with that focusing system, with that drive speed, 30 frames per second, with that focusing system, lightning fast autofocus, right? You're getting lightning fast autofocus. And so then what Sony did is they brought all of that technology down and they put it into this A7 IV. And so now you have the focusing system of the A1, and you have pretty nice drive speed, right? We're not getting 30 frames per second, but I think for this one, this base model of Sony cameras, right? The base model, you're getting somewhere like 10 or 12, but that dramatically falls off when you're not using a G Master lens. And a lot of people would hear that and say like, oh, you know, why would Sony do that, and blah, 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 blah. Hey, listen, you guys have heard me talk about this before. Sony's literally giving away these cameras. I've talked about this. For $2,500, I think this was a stellar camera, and I think that there's a lot of value for the price, right? So as a professional camera, Sony gave this camera away for the price. And so they need to make up, you know, those dollars, right? Sony's got to get those dollars back somehow. And so, you know, I don't want to say that they cripple hammered the camera, because it's still a fantastic camera with or without a G Master. For the most part, I use a Sigma 35mm with this A7 IV, and I'm certainly happy. But they've got to give some type of incentives when they put out a $2,000 lens. And what are those incentives? Well, your camera's gonna perform drastically better. You're gonna unlock the power of the camera when you go out and you grab this lens. And so I think that brings me to the next point, is that, listen, for you guys who went out and bought your A1s and bought your A7 IVs, it doesn't make sense to me that people would spend the money for these cameras, right? These cameras that people complained was probably too expensive or overpriced or whatever, and then not have the ability to use them, you know, to their fullest. Because quite frankly, right, there is another 50mm out there that does this a very serviceable job, right? The 50mm 1.4 Zeiss lens, which is only $500 cheaper. And if you're asking me, that $500 and everything that you get with this lens makes up for it, especially when you're like myself and you get it for $300 off. So for $200 difference, it was a no-brainer for me. But what I wanted to get at, it's getting super windy, guys. But what I wanted to get at is that unlocking all of the power of your camera with this lens will I think satisfy some of those people who kind of said like, oh, you know, this camera felt like an incremental increase. I say nay because after I've had this lens for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I took it on a vacation to California. We took the kids to Disneyland. I'll throw some of those photos and video up. But using this camera in conjunction with this 50mm lens, I've talked about this before, increases the wanting to go out and use the camera. We talked about it before. Pat Tommaso and Caleb from Moment, I can't remember, Babcock, Caleb from Moment, they put it best. This is one of, if not the best kind of dad cam we have on the market right now, right? You just pick it up, You go out, you take some photos of your kids. You turn it on. It's easy to use, and I think with a 50 millimeter, that becomes even more so. You get even more of that kind of dad cam kind of feeling. If you guys don't know this about the 50 millimeter focal length, it's touted to be like naturally, like what our eye sees, naturally, most comfortably. And so with this 50 millimeter, we were out on the beach at Santa Monica, and I'm just filming my kids, and I tell you, it's just a chef kiss. And so for all of you naysayers out there who would say, I can get the same shots, or I can get the same image, with 50 millimeter 1.8 or whatever, you're right. You might be able to get 70% of the way there, 80% of the way there, right? But I've always said this about photography, about videography, that it's not about the destination, right? Like, okay, the destination is great, but it's about getting there. It's about the journey. It's about how hard you have to work to get that final image, to get that photo, right? And if you can take one photo because you've got the right equipment instead of taking 10 photos, then that means a lot more to me, right? Especially when you're talking about people who are wedding photographers, or people who are like sports photographers or event photographers, or it's whatever, people who work in fast moving situations where you have but one opportunity to get that shot, right? That's where this lens comes in, right? You pick it up, you point it, it's so fast, boom, you got the shot, it's in focus, you nailed it. I would argue that there's no other 50 millimeter out there for Sony that's going to allow you the type of speed that you need to be able to have the confidence to grab that shot. Now, again, let's go back to the Zeiss, right? The Zeiss is a pretty serviceable lens, but in all of the 50 millimeters that are on the market for the Sony system, they've all just been kind of good enough. Just good enough has been the overwhelming conclusion to 50 millimeters on the Sony system. I think if you go out and watch other reviews, and remember, you don't have to, because this is the last 50 millimeter G Master review that you'll have to watch. But if you did go out and watch other reviews, or if you have watched other reviews, the overwhelming sentiment about this lens is that it's near perfect. Near perfect. Now let's talk about some of the downfalls, right? Some of the cons of this lens. And if you're a Sony A7 4 shooter, your ears just perked up because you know exactly where I'm going. The number one con about this lens is the focus breathing, right? And I'll come clean. Until I was watching Jesse's video, I didn't really understand what focus breathing was. But focus breathing is this. So if I show this lens to the camera, you can see like around here, it kind of zooms in a little bit. It does that thing where it kind of changes the perspective of the shot. A little secret for you guys. I actually think that that's cool. It kind of brings your attention into what it is that people are trying to show you. But apparently people don't like it. They say it's distracting, and that was the one major con about this lens. If you are a person who shoots with the A7 IV, right? Let's get back to that technology. Sony's built in a lens breathing compensation thing where it doesn't do that. Now I would go ahead and show you guys this, but I've built up this A7C rig that it's not easy to change out, and so I'm not gonna pop the A7 IV on and show you guys, but I'll throw up a little video showing you guys what I mean. All right, so here I am once again. It's your boy, Editor Jamil. I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate that lens compensation breathing. So here we go. Lens breathing compensation. So boom, I show it to the camera. No breathing. No breathing. One more time. Boom, no breathing. So yeah, that's that. So if you're an A7 IV shooter, then the lens breathing goes away, right? You no longer have that con on this lens. And then the second con on this lens is that it is expensive. And listen, it is an expensive lens. But photography is an expensive hobby. It's an expensive kind of thing to get into. And if you're a working professional, you're gonna make this money back in a job or two. And so, and if you're like me, everything's happening right now. We got the wind, we got the dog, we got a train. Hopefully this Rode video mic 2 is picking me up pretty clearly. Where was I? Price. And if you're like me, I knew very on that I was in the market for a 50mm. I knew that I was very on that I thought I would go out and buy this lens. And then if you guys have been watching the video, the channel, you guys know that I've gone out and tested some other 50mm lenses that I thought would probably get me, 60 or 70% of the way there. But when it all came down to it, the 50mm G Master was the way to go. And here's the other thing. Here's the other kind of thing that people don't really talk about when talking about price. I owned the 50mm 1.8. Trash of lens. It's a piece of garbage. And it focuses slowly. It's super duper loud. It's not sharp at all. And although it's not a very pricey lens, for 50mm, when compared to other budget 50mm, it is expensive, especially for the piece of trash that it is. You end up wasting that money. So then you add that money onto the price of the 50mm that you should have gotten, because you're not going to get 100% of that money back, right? You buy it for, I think at the time I bought it for like $350. You're lucky if you get $250 back by the time you realize that it's trash, so you've lost $100. Then you go out and you try the Rokinon lens, and you realize that has like a flaw where, like, when you bring it up, it opens, the iris opens up really wide, and it doesn't focus as fast as you need it to. You bring it up, the iris opens immediately. I don't know what it is, but it opens immediately, and you're trying to focus, and it's taking, up to a second before you can find focus. That is devastating when you're trying to grab a shot. The 55mm, that's not a 50mm lens. You lose 5 millimeters, and your shot, because it's not a true 50mm. The 1.4 is a good lens, but at this point it's like 6 years old, and at this point it's still overpriced. It's still like $1,500. You know what I mean? For old focusing technology that you're putting on, a new body. So then, before I made this, so in conclusion for that thought, you just end up throwing money into 50mm lenses that you're not going to be happy with. I would argue that anybody who shoots Sony, who has a 50mm lens that's not the G Master, is not 100% in love with the 50mm that they have. I would argue that, and I think if people are being honest with themselves, they've come to the conclusion that the 50mm that they have is good enough, right? If you try really hard, you can get the shot, but you gotta work to get there. Though that's the conclusion for all other 50mm, is that you gotta work to get the shot. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and it goes back to the technology of using a Sony body and this 50mm G Master. This is my A7 IV. This is my A7R4. And if you guys know, if you guys are Sony users, you know what the A7 IV is. 61 megapixel high resolution camera. And again, that comes with an asterisk, a little star, right? 61 megapixels high resolution if you're using G Master lenses, or if you're using Sony branded lenses or whatever. This 50mm is probably the sharpest. I'm not even going to say probably. This 50mm lens is the sharpest lens I've ever used in my photography career. And so what I wanted to do is, before I put out this review, I wanted to go out and shoot with this combination, this 61 megapixel high resolution camera, and then this super sharp 50mm 1.2, because I wanted to test the resolving power of this lens with this high resolution camera. And so there's a tree back here. You guys can't see it. It's a cherry blossom tree, which I think is amazing, being in the middle of the city. And so I'm gonna go out. I want to snap some pictures of that. I want to kind of walk around the neighborhood a little bit, snap some photos with the A7 IV, and then after I do that, we'll pick back up with this video, and then we'll talk about how I think the 50mm did with the high resolution camera. So I'll see you guys after that, and with the power of video, you guys won't have to wait long. All right, so as you guys can see, we are very much later in the day. I have spent some time shooting with the A7R4, like I said, and I have some thoughts. One, it's fantastic. I didn't get to shoot as many photos as I would have liked, just because I ran out of time, and you know, things happen, kids, life, food. And so I will throw some photos up on the screen just so you guys can see how they turned out. But when we talk about, you know, the sharpness of this lens, and we talk about the resolving power of this lens when coupled with these 61 megapixels, I know that it'll just do a disservice on YouTube, because everything's just so compressed. And even when printing out photos, just showing those photos on YouTube also does them a disservice. But I can tell you guys with 100% certainty that this is the sharpest lens and camera combo paired together that I've ever used. And so what I want to do now is I just want to give some final thoughts on this lens and just kind of reiterate some things that I've already said. Should you go out and buy this lens? Absolutely. If you are a person who owns a Sony camera, anything, you know, newer than, you know, an A7 II, So A7 III, A7R3, especially the A7S3, A1, A1 II, I'm sorry, A9, A9 II, A1, A7 IV, absolutely run out and get this lens, especially if you are someone who is in the market for a 50mm lens. Don't waste your money on a lens that you're just going to be satisfied with, or a lens that you say, you know, is just good enough. Because ultimately, at least in my experience, what has happened is I have always gone out and bought the lens that I wanted in the long run. And so that's my advice. Secondly, this lens is going to unleash all of the power of the camera that you've bought, especially if you have an A9, especially if you have like an A7 or an A7S3, all of those newer cameras. This camera is just going to allow you to be able to unleash all of the power, all of the things that are promised in those promotional videos when they're announcing these cameras. And then the last reason is just that it is absolutely on its own an amazing lens. When you talk about sharpness, when you talk about the journey from getting to, you know, the things that you've dreamed up to the final product, to when you think about all of the things that a 50mm lens gives you, this lens does all of those things better than any other available 50mm lens for the Sony E-mount system. So those are my things. Just the technology in this, just what it does to help all of these new Sony cameras, and then just being satisfied. I cannot stress this enough. I believe that anybody who goes out and buys this lens will absolutely come to the conclusion that they love it and that it is absolutely the best lens that they're gonna have for their system. And so those are my thoughts. Yes, if you're on the fence, if you're someone who is in the market for a 50mm, absolutely go out and buy this lens. I don't even think this is one of those things where I'm gonna say, you know, but be fiscally responsible. No, just go out and buy the lens, because you know what? You're gonna waste money on other lenses anyway. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm Jamil. This is a boy named Jamil. We're losing light fast. So I will see you guys in the next video. All right, peace.